think it's now widely understood that the TRIPS agreement has consequences for international inequality, and particularly problematic consequences for less developed countries. What is less well understood by people who discuss innovation and inequality, I think, is that another important change that happened at much the same time as TRIPS was the deregulation of a lot of health services in the underdeveloped world. So now, when there are innovations in drug technologies, there are also changes in what one could call supply chain for drugs. That is, there are changes in the organisation of the health services. And 3 innovations in the supply chain of drugs to African countries that have happened quite recently have been a big rise in the funding of TB and HIV drugs, which have been supplied directly to people in African rural areas, for example, free at the point of use. And at the same time, a rise in local production of drugs, which are going into a market, partly deregulated, where people have to pay for drugs. So there's a real debate going on, a real set of issues going on about whether reform in terms of changes in the supply of medicines should also reform the way in which people get access to medicines. And I think when we talk about innovation in terms of pharmaceuticals, we also need to talk about innovation in terms of the reorganisation of the supply chains. And in particular, we need to ask ourselves whether the deregulation, which had the effect that people in African countries almost always have to pay for drugs out of their pockets, should be reformed simultaneously to create a system of medicines free at the point of use, very much along the lines that has happened already in TB and HIV drugs. And if so, how that can be done, and how it can be done in a way that also supports this increase in local production of medicines.